Listeners, welcome back to another episode of the Lead Well podcast. This is Brandon Holland, your host, and really excited about the episode that we have for you today. Our next guest is an author, a husband, a father, a speaker. He's done some preaching and done some ministry, and one of my good friends, Mr. Ben Cranford. Ben, welcome to the show.
Brandon, it's so good to be here, man. I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before we get started, just a quick thank you to our sponsors, Shackelford Leadership Institute and HyperX. And with that, Ben, so you've written a book recently, and you've lived a lot of life, man. And
Yeah,
let's just bring our listeners, let's get our listeners a little bit more familiar with you and who you are. If you would, just give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you're up to these days.
yeah, absolutely. Well, we graduated high school together,
Yeah, buddy.
so go Tigers. Went to as soon as I left as soon as I graduated high school, went to college, knowing I can't tell my story without talking about Jesus. So just know that. So I went straight into college, graduated with a Christian studies with a concentration in youth ministry. And then I was in seminary when kind of the pit happens, which is what the book is about. Um, I've been in serving on church staff for about 10 years, just kind of taken a step back from that the last several years, still serve as a layperson with our college and career, but still heavily involved there, but just not in a paid position.
So Ben, so it's one thing to be in the pit and to kind of go through it, right? But it's a completely different thing to want to write about it. So what led you to wanting to share your story and to put it on paper?
Yeah, for years I was completely okay with letting no one know about my pit. Um, I Last year we were walking through with our college class the life of David, and if you know David in the Bible, you know that he had these high highs, these mountaintop experiences, but he also had these low lows, pits, if you will, and I knew them. I've studied them. I've read them my whole life, but just last year it became real. And as we're studying it, I just felt this pressing on my life. That's how I described it. And around that same time, I began to look around at people, maybe in my circle, people we graduated with, people I went to high school with, college with, even a young girl I went to church with who saw their pit as something that was too deep and too dark, and they did in their life. And again, just this pressing that God was laying on my heart. And so I'm journaling and I'm writing and I'm studying, and and somewhere in the middle of that it just begins to change into chapters and writing my story, which early on I began to say it was my story, but I really believe it's a story of hope. Um, and I'll never forget, Lisa was sitting at this table doing homework one night with one of the kids, and I sent her what would be the first three chapters, a rough sketch. And she looks at it, she says, Ben, what's this? And I tell her, I said, Lisa, I think I'm writing a book. And we began to have conversations of should we do this? Is this something we want to do? Sharing your deepest, darkest days. And Brendan, I can't tell you how many times we've had just opportunities to talk with people since we did that about pits and about depression and about suicide and recovery groups. It's really been neat to see just God open up door after door when you're willing.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that's always true is that when we're obedient to what He's put in us, He'll always make the way and open the doors. Man, that's exciting. So So what was one of the I guess one of the challenges you faced while writing the book?
I I really didn't want any. It's been almost 10 years since the pit, since my darkest day in my life. And as a guy, men, we like to think we like to put on this facade that we have it all together. We ask how you're doing. We did that a little bit, and we said good. But deep down, man, I've had listen. I would be lying to you if I didn't say I still had issues. Not the ones that I had, but um, I was having a conversation with somebody today, and he said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm a lot better now." And that's honesty. When we can when we can just lay it out there and not have to lie, not have to put up this facade of. So I guess just the realization of putting myself out there. Um, it's still I still cringe a little bit,
Yeah.
but it's I feel free having done that.
Wow. And that's how it should be, man. That's definitely how it should be. So like what was like the turning point where you realized like that, your pit doesn't have to define your future or doesn't have to defeat you?
Yeah, it wasn't for me. It wasn't one big dramatic moment.
Okay.
It was a lot of small ones. And if you don't mind, I would love to share my pit.
Please do.
Um, I I told you I served in church for almost a decade, and somewhere in the midst of that, um, I began to buy into the lie that just one time is okay. Nobody needs to know. This isn't going to hurt anybody. And what soon became as um, what soon how that happened turned into addiction, turned into um, a pit that didn't even know I was digging. I got fired from my job, my that ministry job. I started working doing some contract work, and my friend Frank puts it like this. Um, He says, no matter where I was, there I was. We moved, and it didn't matter that we moved. My pit, my sin, my shame, my addictions followed me. I got fired from that second job, and if I can just get real, um, I went home that day and I grabbed my gun and I drove around town and I put it to my head and I asked the question, is life worth living? Because in that moment I saw no hope. I was a failure as a man. I couldn't provide for my family. I was a failure as a husband, as a dad. I saw no hope. And it was in that moment with the gun pressed to my head where it doesn't matter how dark the pit is, it doesn't matter how deep it is. The neat thing is that light always shines through. Even the smallest glimmer shines through darkness. And Jesus did that. And it was in that pit, in that moment, where I realized that that He saw me, and that He loved me regardless. And I'll never forget talking about uh, the pit defining me. I'll never forget that next Easter. We sat in the sanctuary, and tears were just coming down my face when I realized uh, God's grace and His love and His mercy. And I preached those things before, but it was in that moment that they became real, that I experienced. And one of the things we did early on in writing the book was we took some of our favorite quotes in the book and we made stickers. And one of the stickers we made is the pit doesn't get the last word, God does. The pit doesn't get to define us. Our past mistakes, our failures, our addictions don't define us, that Jesus does. So that's a little bit about when I realized the pit didn't have power and didn't define me.
Yeah. Wow, man. So obviously, this was some time ago and you've made it out, right?
Yeah.
So what are some practical steps that others could use, from your experience of, things that they could use to start making progress out of where they're at.
Yeah, I think for I'll give you four. I think first is being honest with yourself. Um, sometimes the 12-step programs get a bad rap, but the very first step is just being honest, admitting you have a problem. You can't fix what you don't admit. And so just admitting you have a problem, admitting you messed up. Sometimes that is a pit that we create, and sometimes that's a pit that the earth just opens up and swallows us whole. And it's no fault of our own. But just admitting that there's an issue, admitting something, that there's a problem. Um, in chapter 2, I talk about the lie of isolation. So many times we try to isolate ourselves. But I think the second thing I'd say is being in community, whether that is family, friends, church, counseling, being in a community that will walk through this pit with you. I think one of the things I feared was this idea of judgment, and the people that surrounded around me, they didn't do that. Again, one of the lies that I thought I believed. Replace lies with truth. You go from I failed to I am a failure, or I messed up to I am a mess. Just replacing those lies with truth. And I think the last thing is just one step at a time. You ain't got to do all 12. You ain't got to fix your life overnight. Just do one thing, focus on that one thing, and then later on do something else. I think that's the place to start.
Yeah, that's terrific advice, dude. Those are great steps, and it brings one thing to mind for me. Um, I heard this was back when I was in college, I believe. Um, I heard a pastor say, we were just guys doing that guy thing where we don't want to talk about our problems and all this kind of stuff. And I heard a pastor say, he was like, "Look, man," he said, "if you were supposed to go through this life alone, you'd be the only one here. Like you have to walk with others through it."
Yeah, absolutely.
And that just, it really spoke volumes to, God's already put all the people and resources and everything we need here. So, we just got to tap into it.
Yeah, and I mean, and as a man of faith, I mean, look at the life of Jesus. He, even he had those right there. He came in, and he didn't do it on his own. He had those 12, and even in those 12, he had three that kind of clung closer to him. I mean, even he had a community around him. And so, if the Savior of the world can do that, then surely Ben Cranford needs it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, man. So, in, talking about faith, like in this journey, like how did that impact your faith? Like how did your faith evolve during this time?
Yeah. It I don't think it didn't just grow. I think it changed. Like I said, um, I had preached grace and love and forgiveness. I was in the middle of seminary. I'm only a couple classes away from graduating seminary, and I stepped away from it. Um, but when I realized it that Easter, and when it became real, I got this new sense of who God is, of what He offers. And I think that perspective has given me this opportunity in writing this book and in having these conversations with people, of just meeting people where they are. That's really our heart in this whole book process isn't making money, isn't becoming known or famous. I wouldn't have written a book about sin and addiction had I wanted
Right.
fame and popularity. But it's just meeting people where they are and letting them know, like we said before, that our past, our sin, our addictions, our shame, our regrets don't define us. That only God gets to do that. And so it's challenged me. It's opened up doors and conversations that I would have never had, even with some of my closest friends. We talk about recovery groups, to talk about suicide and addiction, and just to walk alongside people and say, "Man, I've been there." and there is hope. Um, so it definitely grew, but it also changed um, how I talk and how I communicate with people.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So, what's been the biggest change for you in your life since then?
Um, I think just biggest change probably just opening up my hands and saying, God, if you can use my mess for your message, let's do it. Um, and it's in that surrender where sometimes God will give you a New York Times bestseller. This certainly isn't. I would encourage you to pick up a copy of my book, but sometimes it's just him opening doors for you to have conversations with people. I was at work just the other day, clocked in. I was on the clock, getting paid company time, and this guy was sitting beside me, and he said, "Hey, if I get quiet, just know I'm going through some stuff." And right there, we were just able to have a conversation about the pit, more so about the hope that is beyond it.
How do you find hope when you're in it?
Oh, man, uh, it's that's a great question because the pit, like I said, it can be deep and dark, and there are people who obviously don't see hope. Like I said, our some of our friends gave up. I think surrounding yourself with people. I mean, listen, isolation really is the enemy's biggest weapon that he uses against us
Yeah,
to keep us quiet, to keep us alone. And it's just surrounding yourself with people who you trust and who support you, who will hold your secrets as their secrets. Um, Man, I think that's one of the most valuable things you can do. I think that, listen, there's something to counseling. As a matter of fact, later this month, I'm going to sit down with the counseling center around here and have one of these same conversations of how can counseling help people in the pit. What is this illusion that only people who are really messed up need counseling? Now, listen, I would suggest to anybody. I'd suggest you even just it's good
yeah,
just to get stuff off your chest and just to talk to somebody in confidence. So I think those are a couple ways.
that's awesome, man. And that brings me to it makes me think about just consider it all joy.
Oh
Because
yeah,
we always, a lot of times it's too deep for us to see the light or to see the way out. But, if we're rooted in that and we know that, that all things are going to work for the good, then,
yeah,
I'm not going to say it makes it easier, but it gives your suffering purpose.
yeah. There are a couple stories I share in the book where a check showed up in our mailbox and it was exactly what we needed. And there was a cooler full of food that just showed up on our front doorstep where a friend bought our kids' school supplies. And in the moment, I may not see it as God providing, but y- looking back, I see that God was there the whole time. In my pit, God was there. God was that glimmer of hope that made me not pull the trigger. God was there when I needed that specific amount of money that was in the mailbox. Not that it happens every time, but it's in those small moments that's just a reminder that we aren't alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's a good father. Man, that's that's awesome. So like when you look back, do you see the pit as something that you escaped or something that helps like shape you and mold
Yeah. Um, honestly, it's both, and I'm
you?
not
Okay.
trying to use the cop out answer. Um, Listen, if I could go back and do it all over again, I wouldn't wish the pit upon anybody.
Right. Right.
Uh, Absolutely not. I mean, those were some of the darkest days of my life. So no doubt I escaped it. In fact, today I sit here and I'll tell you, man, I'm free. and it's something for an addict to say that. Um, because those days, man, I fought hard for my life, for my marriage, for freedom, um, but um, also where we're at to write this book, to have conversations, even here now, about hope and about the hope that's found in Jesus, about suicide and addiction and recovery. Um, man, no doubt it shaped me, but but it but it's also something that freed from.
Yeah, man, that's incredible. That's incredible, man. So what else? What else about the book do our listeners need to know, man? Like, why why else would you go? Should we go get it?
Listen, the book is $12.99 on Amazon. A couple weeks ago, we dropped it down to $9.99. Is 99, and we dropped it down to $5 for Easter, and it's back to normal price now. But we do that all the time. Uh, I think if you're in the pit, if you know somebody who's in the pit, I, I'm not saying that this book is the answer to addiction and suicide, but I do believe that the verses in here points to a Savior who is. Um, our website beyondmypit.com. Um, there's a lot of resources there. Um, Daily devotionals. There's some group stuff if you want to walk together as a group through the book. There's some group questions and discussion guides. Um, we put up, not often, maybe once a month right now, we're putting up videos of people telling their story of their pit and how they overcame it and how they're living beyond their pit. Um, so I think if anything, it's a story of my pit for sure. But it's a story of hope more than anything else. And it. I think at some point in our lives, we're all in need of hope.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Man, dude, this has been a great conversation, Ben. I really appreciate your time and your openness, and you being able to share with us and our audience. Um, Anything else before we get ready to wrap it up, man? What's your one? I guess one last question. What's your message to the person who's in the pit right now?
That the pit's real, and if I'm just honest, it stinks. I would say other words, but I don't know. We're on pie, so I'm not going to say other words. The pit's real, and it's hard, and it, it can beat you down, but there is hope. And I'd say don't give up. There are people that love. There are people who care. There are people who don't want to see you give up. I'd say hold on to that. Um, Hold on to Jesus. Listen, I told you I can't tell you my story without telling you his. And his story is a story of coming into a broken world full of broken, messed up, jacked up people and saving us. Um, and that's kind of in chapter 15, the very end. We talk about really our need for that, our need for saving. So don't give up. People love you. People want you, and your pit doesn't define you.
Absolutely. And I'll just add to that. If you don't give up, everything that you go through will serve you.
Yeah,
There is no failure. It'll
yeah,
all serve you as long as you don't give up. So wow, dude, thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for your time.
absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and hey, listeners, thank you for your time. Thank you for rocking with us. We will have another episode for you 2 weeks from today. And again, a special thanks to our sponsors, HyperX and Shackleford Leadership Institute. And we will see you next time.